Morning, my fans of the Vegas Baby Show. All two of you. I'm just kidding. I hope you guys had a great weekend. Now you're back out in the world again, and hopefully, I'll bring some laughter. Um, I got some good feedback from Friday's show. I know it was a little intense, but I tried to put some funniness in there. I got to tell the story. So this week, I'm going to tell the story some days, and then I've got some surprises. Tomorrow is my first big surprise. I'm pretty excited. You don't want to miss it. You really don't. I'm going to give you a hint. It's another guest, but this one is special. You are so not going to want to miss it. I was really kind of shocked when she got in touch with me, and I'm like, well, yeah, of course you can be on my show. Are you kidding me? You? I said, I'll have a lot of fans. And if I tell you, I don't know. I'll think about it. I might say it, I might not today. But I'm teasing. Anyways, today is part two of our 16-year journey of Bill's sickness with VHL, von Hippel-Lindau. So I had told you how we ended up. Um, Last I left you on Friday was he helicoptered down to the hospital he was staying in, which was Columbus Hospital. It's no longer there, but it was a fantastic hospital. We spent many hours at that place for many years until the nuns sold it. The nuns sold it so it could be condos. Yeah, I know. And it was actually right across from Lincoln Park Zoo, so it was down there. So anyway, so now we will lead off where Bill had helicoptered down. Remember we had taken the Yabba Dabba Doo car, my sister's car down there. We got down there, and they were just trying to get him settled to try to figure out. And actually, one of his doctors was on staff. His internist happened to be on Sunday. It was a Sunday, and I was like so grateful to see his face. I'm like, oh my God, Dr. H, I cannot tell you how happy I'm to see you. And he's like, let's figure out what's going on. And so they were talking, and then they talked to the other hospital, and they were like, we got to figure out why this happened and this and that. And then they found out that Condell had given him a lot of Demerol to stop the seizures. Well, because he didn't have any kidneys, the amount of Demerol they gave him, he said, Dr. H said, he may not wake up for at least in 24 hours because he doesn't have the ability to wash. His kidneys aren't in there to wash out the drug, so it's going to take longer to get out because of the dialysis. So he's probably going to be out for the next 24 hours because of what. And they were annoyed. They're like, why did they give him so much of that? Don't look at me. You guys wanted him out of there, thank God. So now we're down at Columbus, and they're getting him settled. And then one of the nurses, he's in the ICU, and one of the nurses said to me, oh, we understand that your husband is on peritoneal dialysis. And I said, yes, he is. And remember, they stick the tube, put a tube in you permanently, and then the bag fills in for 4 hours. After the 4 hours, you pull it out, the waste, into another bag. You load another bag in, and then that stays. And she said to me, well, we've got a little problem. And I said, and what's that? And she said, this is a neurological ICU, and this is where Bill belongs, but we don't know anything about peritoneal dialysis. And I'm like, and they're like, and there's really nobody up on the nephrology floor that can help us. I'm like, all right. So I had to train the nurses how to do the dialysis on my husband. It was pretty funny. So I went through all the steps and showed him, and then we walked because I said he needs to have this drained out now, and they're like, okay. So we did it, and I said it has to be done, every 4 hours, and they're like, in and out, in and out, and they're like, okay. And I said, and you don't have a machine that we had overnight, so you're gonna have to keep doing it all every 4 hours. And they're like, okay. So I had to train a bunch of them, and then they were going to train other people until Monday, where they could get somebody from that floor to get down and do it all the time. So I was like, okay. So we got that taken care of. And basically, he said, we're there. There wasn't anything you can do. They said, go home, come back tomorrow morning, and we'll see. So I did. and it was a very long day, right? So we took my sister and I got in the Yabba Dabba Doo car and went back home. And then the next day is Monday, and I get down there, and now we're all down there. His mother and me, and his one brother who lived in Chicago was came. His other brother lives in Colorado. He has two brothers that he has three brothers. Two lived in Illinois, and one lived in Colorado at the time. And so we're down there talking, and they're like, my neurologist, Dr. M, who's a fantastic man, said, we got to do some tests. We don't know what's going on here. And he agreed that the Demerol that they'd give him, now they're saying he may not wake up till Tuesday because they just gave him way too much. He said that hospital did not know what they were doing down there. And I'm like, yeah, I know. He said they shouldn't have kept doing that because he didn't have kidneys. And so I'm like, okay. So, they're just running some tests and they're saying he's not going to wake up for a couple days. So we're just not going to worry too much right now. We're just going to let his body, get over this trauma of the grand mal seizure. He had a couple of them, and the fact that they gave him the drugs. Okay, so we're going, now it's Tuesday and it's Wednesday, and he hasn't woken up yet. And it's getting to the point where, okay, now, and I got to tell you, every doctor on that floor peeked his head into that room to look at him. They are all going in and out. And I said to my mother-in-law, I'm getting charged every time one of those dudes walk in here, and I said to my one doctor, I'm like, why are all these I don't recognize all these doctors. Excuse me. And he's like, well, we have to figure out what's going on. We thought he'd be awake by now, and he's not. And so then it's Thursday, not awake, and everybody's, no, and they're all coming in, looking in, blah, blah, blah. And then, so there was this group. This was this neurological floor at this hospital. Fantastic, fantastic neurologist, Dr. M. Saved Bill's life many, many times. Not many people have a neurologist they see a neurologist for 16 years. Usually neurologists, you make a couple visits, they take care of you, they operate on you, you're done. Not Bill. So it was kind of unusual, and even the doctor said, I've never really had a patient that long, But anyways, so, and it was a group of them, and Dr. M was the main surgeon. He was the guy, and then Dr. C was his partner. They kind of ran this group, and they were, I forget the name of them actually, it's so long ago, but it doesn't matter. And so they would come in the mornings, the doctors would do their rounds, and then they'd come back in the afternoons and do their round. So now Bill's other brother from Colorado flew in, so now he's here. So basically it was his mom and his two brothers. His other brother didn't come during the day, and didn't come much at all actually. And so we're all like, sitting in the room all day staring at him. And then, physical therapists were coming every day, moving his legs, his arms, because, they have to. And at this point, we got the same thing. Every time they saw us in the mornings, his numbers look good. So we're not sure. His numbers look good. That was what they were saying every single day. His numbers look good. What the fuck does that mean? And and so they were like scratching their head. They couldn't figure out why I was in this coma. So then we're at the end of the week, and it was the nighttime rounds. I think it was a Thursday this happened, and it was a nighttime round. Not nighttime, but about 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And the doctors went around, and there was a lot of internists. They had young doctors that they were teaching for neurology. So it's not really a teaching hospital, but they had their own group. So they would bring these interns in to mentor them, teach them, and then they would get all their experience there. So, so the main doctor, Dr. C, the head doctor of the group, was walking around, going into the rooms, and he had all his there was about 4 or 5 of the younger doctors following him around, and he walked into our room, and we're all sitting there. You just wait for them to come in all day, and he walks in and he's like, no change, huh? And we're like, no. And he's like, well, the numbers look good, so we just have to be patient. And I'm like, what? So I asked a couple questions, and he never answered them. And he's like, okay, bye. So then he walks into the other room to the next patient. And the nurse comes in and goes, they all thought he was the god, Dr. C. Oh, Dr. C's here. Well, I didn't fucking care. I just wanted to know what's wrong with my husband. I don't care who he is. The nurse comes in. Oh, so what did Dr. C? Are you really happy? I said, are you fucking kidding me? The numbers are good? No, I'm not happy. You didn't tell me anything. And I got mad and I yelled that and I was kind of loud. And Bill's mother and brothers were like, yeah, no. Oh, I'm sorry. And she skedaddles out really quickly because she didn't want to be involved in that because she knew he was still in the other room, which I didn't think of, nor did I care. Next day, I would get down there. So we were in his room every day, sitting, watching him for 1 month, 10 to 12 hours a day. I had to drop my son off, Michael, at daycare. I had a babysitter who was, Teresa was awesome. It was at her house and everything was going on. She's like, don't worry about it. So then what I arranged, my sister was going to pick him up on her way home from her work and take her to her house. And then I'd come get him and take him home. So I wasn't, unfortunately, getting to spend a lot of time with my son because I was downtown in Chicago and it was an hour at least each way. I always waited for, in the mornings, I usually got there about 9 a.m. because I didn't want to be right in the rush hour, but I always was. And then I always usually waited till after rush hour at night to go home. So, so the next day I walk in, I see you usually walk right in, hi, and they all say, hey, Lynn, blah, 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 blah. So I start to walk into the room and the lady goes, hang on. And she comes, I'm in the room. I said, yeah. She goes, and there's generally waiting. There's generally, you go in for 15 minutes, you come out 15 minutes, but because of us, because my husband was in a coma, we were allowed to be in there all the time until today. She says, well, there's new rules. And I said, what do you mean there's new rules? You can only be in here 15 minutes at a time. Then you got to wait like 45 minutes to an hour and then you can come back. And I said, what? No. And she's like, yeah. So I was in there, and then after it was up, she's like, you got to go wait in the waiting room now. So I'm like, all right, I don't know what to do. So I go in the waiting room. My mother-in-law shows up, and she's like, what are you doing out here? And I told her, and she goes, what? And I said, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And so she's like, come on. Now, my mother-in-law was my height, maybe a little tinnier, and beautiful woman. 105 pounds, sopping wet maybe, but she was a force to be reckoned with. She walks in there and she's like, and starts to walk in the room, and they said the same thing to her. Oh, there's new rules in that. And she's like, I don't think so. And she's like, come with me. So she takes the nurse and she says, go get the supervisor of this floor. And she's like, well, what? She goes, no, I want her now. I'm not going to move from here until she comes. So the girl comes, supervisor comes back. And my mother-in-law looked at her and, all 5'1", and she looked up at her and she said, I don't know what's going on, but we are going to sit in that room as long as we want. We're not going to do any rules. I don't care what happens. And I want you to go repeat this to the man or woman who runs this hospital. Well, we know is a man. But, and she's like, and I want you to repeat exactly what I'm saying. Okay. Now listen carefully. If something happens to my son and I'm sitting out in that waiting room because you've all of a sudden done some rules on us we don't understand, for a week we've been sitting in there behaving ourselves, just watching my son that you guys have no answers for. If something were to happen to him and we're not in there, I will sue this hospital for everything it has. Do you understand me? And she just looked at her. She goes, would you like to repeat back what I just said? And the nurse is like, no. She goes, now go tell somebody that. Right now, I want you to go tell whoever runs the hospital. And the woman's just standing there looking at her. She goes, no, I mean go now. Go. Go. And then finally the woman walked away. I don't know how much longer it was, 10, 15, 20 minutes. One of the regular nurses that we knew who felt really bad, they're like, we feel really bad. And one of the nurses told us why. And I said, what's going on? She goes, apparently Lynn said something last night and the doctor didn't like it. Dr. C heard it and didn't like it. I said, oh, because I said I didn't fucking like hearing the numbers look good. And she's like, yeah. I said, well, that's, and Marilyn, my mother-in-law, was like, well, that ain't gonna, and she's like, well, it don't matter, because you could sit in the room now. That all went away. So now we're back in the room again, which I thought was just freaking awesome. I'm like, right on. So Now we're into the beginning of the second week, and they came to us and said, "Listen, we have no idea why Bill's in this coma. You know, we cannot figure it out." So they just had a tube in his mouth and he was breathing for him. So now they're like, we have to put him on a tracheotomy, and I'm like, what? And they're like, we just have to. So it's easier for him to breathe. We do not want his body to be taxed, and with just the tube helping him, it wasn't. So they ended up putting a tracheotomy in him. So now he's on a trach to help him breathe. So, we're sitting in there day in and day. Oh, yeah. And then the physical therapist people were coming in, and I said, every time they walk in this room, I get charged the insurance. So we had saw what they were doing. So I said, went up to the front desk and said, can we stop it and we'll do it? And they talked, yeah. So we now were doing the physical therapy, moving his legs, moving his arms, that's all you needed to move. And then they got Bill this really big bed. It was about this thick, and it was air was blowing through it all the time. So that was a new bed he was laying on. He wasn't on a regular bed anymore because they just did not know how bad it was going to be. So the week went on, and then they did an EKG, or is it EEG? EEG, I think, for the head. And they came back, and they had already done one the week before and everything. The brain activity was good, they said. So they were happy. And now they did another one. They said, ooh, the brain activity is not good. They said it went way down. It's scaring them. So I'm like, oh my God. And then they started talking to me about putting a DNR on him because, have you and Bill talked about this? And I said, a little bit, because, remember, Bill just got sick in February and all this shit happened, and we're in August now. And I'm like, yeah, and I know how Bill felt about that. So they discussed it, and they said, if he codes, we have to bring him back unless you do a DNR. So I put a DNR on him because that's what Bill wanted. He didn't want to be on machines in a nursing home somewhere with a tracheotomy. Okay, so now that was on. And now we're just like, oh my God. And again, no answers. They're just like, we don't know. So we were kind of looking at my notes because there's so many things that happened. Oh, so we kind of took my family and friends would come and go. If anybody was in Chicago, they would come visit. And there was this clock in the waiting room. And from the day Bill was there in his coma, it was set at 10 to 2. And you constantly look and you're like, darn it, the battery was dead, and no one ever fixed it. But you constantly looked at it because it was just a habit back then, because a lot of people didn't have. And I said there wasn't cell phones back then. I was wrong. The cell phones were huge, but it wasn't prevalent back then like it is now, where everybody, Tom, Dick, and Harry, and Joe, and Susie, and Betty all have one. So what was I saying? Oh shit, it went right out of my head. Oh, so they're like, dang, I can't remember. Oh my God. Okay, let me look at my notes. Oh, the clock. God, why don't one of you remind me what I was talking about? Remember, pickled. The clock. So it went on for a couple days, and we were joking about it because we'd look, because we took turns. Sometimes you had to get a break and come out of the room, and we always made sure somebody was there with Bill during the day. So I was sitting out there with my brother-in-law, and we looked, and I'm like, damn it, if I look at that clock one more time. And he's like, I know. So the next day, Keith, his brother, comes in and he bought batteries. So we get in a chair, we get up there, and he changes the batteries in the hospital clock. It was too freaking funny. People were waiting and they were laughing, and oh my God, we were laughing so hard about that. And then we started doing soap opera talk. So, like there was the surgeon, and then there was what they call the PA, physician's assistants, and there was a couple of them, and there was Margaret, was awesome because she got us through that month like nobody else. She held my hand, she listened, she was just awesome. And so we would joke, we'd be like, Margaret's shirt's on backwards. Did you notice that? And I'm like, yeah, I noticed. And she has different color um, nylons on than she had 2 hours ago. We're like, what were her and Dr. M doing? were they having a little tryst in the closet over there? Oh my God, we would do that all the time. And then they would walk in the room and be laughing because remember, you're sitting in this room um, 10 to 12 hours a day. Let's just say 10 hours a day, which is long enough. And it was just so everybody knew us at the hospital, everybody. And we got to know the nurses in the ICU really well and really well. So then and then we were just like, oh man. So now we're getting into the end of the second week, beginning of the third week, and then they did another EKG or EEG, whatever the hell it is, and his brain waves went back up, and they're like, oh. So then they're like, now we're entering week 3, and they're like, we don't know. And this one doctor we had Dr. H, who was his internist, who Bill just adored. We adored Dr. M and Dr. H, but Bill had more of a connection with Dr. H. I had more of it with Dr. M. Dr. M was the neurologist, Dr. H was the internist. And he pulled me aside and he's like, Lynn, honey, I know this is tough. I feel so bad for you. And he's like, honestly, I think Bill his body was exhausted from everything he's been through the last 4 or 5 months. And I know he's going to wake up and be fine. And I'm like, yeah. And he's holding my hand. He's like, no, really, I just do. And I'm like, okay, Dr. H, I hope so. And he's like, you are incredible people because you're just, we never left them. And then and then Michael was 2.5 now. Or did he had just turned 3? 92. He's 3 now. He just turned 3. And so on the way to the daycare, we used to sing on the way. We would sing like Doe a Deer, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, him and I. And if it was Christmas time, we'd sing Christmas carols. Michael and I did that all the time in the car. So then I had Michael, I know they say hearing things helps. So I had Michael sing Doe a Deer, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and then he talked to Bill. And then I had recorded some music that Bill liked, so I put it on a cassette, and then we put it in his ears while he was in his coma, and we were hoping that would help, right? Anything we could do. So now we're in the third week, and we're just exhausted, back and forth, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, driving down Chicago. You can just imagine bewildered to know what, and then they're starting to talk to me about if he doesn't wake up soon he's going to have to go into a nursing home, blah blah blah. And I'm like, he never would have wanted that. I'm like, no. So one day his mom, there was the 4 of us, his 2 brothers, me, I could say their first names, Keith and Rob, and Marilyn and I. And we're sitting there, and Marilyn went down to have a cigarette. So the 3 of us are just sitting there. And a lot of times doctors would come in. There was a flashlight right there. Come in. They would open Bill's eye and shine it in and look, right? So we were sitting there, and one of us said, I wonder what they're looking at when they're doing that. And we're like, I know. So they're like, let's see. So we get this big idea. We close the blinds. We shut the door to the ICU room we're in, so we made it darker. And then we're looking around for the flashlight, which was always there. It was this white flashlight. From the moment Bill checked in 3 weeks earlier, it was there, and all of a sudden it wasn't there. We're like, where the hell's the flashlight? I don't know. So, okay, hang on. Wait, I'm going away. I'm right here. I gotta make it which even better, because this will make the story better, because when I've told people the story, So, Bill's laying there in bed on a tracheotomy, machines, shit ton of machines on him, and we're like, Rob goes, I have an idea, Rob. I don't know, Keith, whatever. I have a lighter. Let's use that. So now Bill's laying there. We take the eye, and he goes like this by his eye. I'm not kidding you. We did that. All of a sudden, Bill shoots up and then flies back down, and the machines are going beep, 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 beep. We're like, fuck. So we open the drapes real quick and kick the door open, and then we sit down real quick. And the nurse comes running in. What's going on? We don't know. The machines just started going off, and he kind of moved a little. And they're like, he moved? We're like, how did he move? We're like, well, he kind of went up and then down and back on. And they're like, oh my God, we got to tell the doctors. And we're like, fuck, oh my God. And then Marilyn walks back in, and the three of us are sitting there, and she's like, what's going on? We're like, Bill just kind of did something, and the machines went off, and we don't know why. And she's like, you guys look like something's up. We're like, no, 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 nothing's up. We're like, oh my God, we can't tell her. She'll kill us. So the doctors come in and they look them over and they're like, man, everything was stable again. And they're like, well, something must have been going on. And we're like, I guess. Anybody got that flashlight? You might want to check his eyes. Now, remember, we were exhausted, so it wasn't exactly the smartest thing to do, but it is a great story. And we told Bill about it probably it was after he was home. Long after he was home, we finally told Bill about it, and he thought it was hilarious. And he's like, oh, because then it prompted something to him about a dream he had. There was a fire in the dream, a big fire. And we're like, uh-oh, that was us. So, and Marilyn did not know about it because we were like, we can never tell your mom. She will be so mad at us. She ended up finding out about 3 years after it was all over. It came up, somebody said something, and she's like, what? And at first she was mad, and then she laughed. So, and then we get to, now we're in week 4. Again, nobody knows nothing. We're just like, what the hell? And it's just like, this is, and people came and went. We missed going to a Cubs game. Our whole group was supposed to go to a Cubs game on a Saturday. We bought the tickets in like February. And they all stopped by the hospital before they went to the game. And they wanted to see Bill. And I'm like, well, you can see him, but it's just not a good look. There's tubes, there's a trach. So a couple of them did, most didn't. And then they went to the game and got drunk for us. So, so now we're in week 4. And people were coming and going, all for the 3 weeks. And my son basically was living, well, sometimes he was with my parents, and then sometimes I would, he was with me because I wanted to see him at night. So then we're in week 4 of the coma. And me and Rob, we're going to go downstairs and get something to drink or have a cigarette or something. And we push the elevator, and the elevator's doors open. And who's on the elevator? Oprah Winfrey. I kid you not. She had a big hat on, sunglasses, but it was Oprah. I said, you're Oprah. And she's like, I am. And I'm like, oh my God. And, then you don't know what to say. And I was so pissed because I should have talked to her more like, hey, I have a good story. Of course, he hadn't woken up yet. Had he woken up, we could have been on our show because it was a great story. But she's like, yes. And then she skipped off real fast. So we went downstairs and we're like, oh my God, that was freaking Oprah. What's she doing at this? And it wasn't a huge hospital. It wasn't like, it was more of a specialty hospital. Really, what was running this, keeping this hospital going was the neurological floor because this group of doctors were just incredible. And they were doing things that hadn't been done with other things, which you'll find out later in the show, in the story. And so then we come back up, and one of the nurses from the ICU room goes, Oprah Winfrey's here. You have to go find her and tell your story. And I said, well, there isn't really anything to tell. He's still in a coma. And she's like, well, you should go find him. And she's like, and so it turns out that one of her producers had a small tumor, a benign tumor, and had to have it removed, and they did it. And turns out she was next door to Bill for a couple days. And then Oprah came when they moved her to the regular floor, which was just down the way. And then they're like, go find her. Bring her back here. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to go find her. Leave her alone, But that was funny. Oprah and Winfrey. And, and I said, we laughed because I said, I could tell it was you right away. And she laughed. She goes, I know. But the hat, she had this huge hat and glasses, but it was like, yeah, no, it's you. So now we're going on through the week 4. And now we're getting close to the bear season starting. It's the end of September. It's the end of August. And I'm like, so I was there one Sunday morning. I brought the Sunday paper when people used to still read Sunday papers. Remember those days? And I was reading it, and it was kind of nice. I was reading him the sports section. Nobody was there. It was just me and him, and that was rare. And I kind of enjoyed it, And then I said to him a couple things. I said, Bill, the Bears season is going to start in a week. You really need to wake up because I can't watch the games here. And I laughed and I read him some more of the paper. And then I leaned over and I whispered into his ear, it's going to get a little serious here, so be ready, guys. Get your hankies ready. I said, if you know something that we don't know, because you're in there and we're not, and you know you're never going to be the Bill we want or even close to it, it's okay to let go. I'll take care of Michael. It'll be tough. But if you're not Bill and you don't want to do it, it's okay to let go. So I had decided that Monday. Oh, this was the other thing. Oh, I forgot to mention. I was being laid off at my job. We had just, right before Bill found out he was sick, we found out we were going to be laid off by September of that year. So now I'm like, no, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to have health insurance. Right? So I said, I got to go to work on Monday. So he's been in the coma 4 weeks. I hadn't been to work at all because actually they were just packing everything up. I worked in the warehouse office of the warehouse. So I did inventory control, confirmation of orders, truck orders, that kind of stuff. And so they were basically cleaning out the warehouse. So they really didn't need me that much. And somebody out, they got a temp and, stuff like that. So I didn't care. But now I'm like, oh my God. So I went into work that Monday. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to lose my insurance. And I work for a great company, Beckman Instruments. Awesome. And they said, we thought about that. And there's a job up front in the office. Only the warehouse was being closed. The office was staying open. And then we were going to move to a smaller office once they found one. And they were taking that warehouse and moving it to another warehouse across east. So they were going to take care of everything. And they're like, we found you a job up here in the office if you want it. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, it might be part-time, but you're going to get full-time insurance. Don't worry. Just take care of your husband. Then all of a sudden, there's a phone call in the office, and they're like, Lynn, the hospital's on the phone. I'm like, what? And I pick up the phone. I go, yeah. And they're like, oh, my God, you got to get down here. And I'm like, what? They're like, he opened his eyes. What? So apparently, when they did the morning rounds, the doctor had his back to Bill, and he was talking to his, all the little groupies that were just, oh, Dr. C, you're just awesome. I think it was Dr. C, not Dr. M. I can't remember. And, oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And he's like, now, here's a patient. And now he's got his back to him, and he's talking to this guy. Here's a patient, we cannot figure it out. 4 weeks he's been in a coma. We don't know why. And he's like, now if he just wake up, he could tell us what's going on. And all of a sudden, they said everybody's eyes got big, and they're like, and they pointed, and then he turned around, and his eyes were open. And they're like, oh my God. So, and remember, he can't talk, this and that. And I did forget something. 4 days earlier, they decided to go into his brain and do surgery, open it up and see what was going on. And this was very intense. They had to work with Children's Hospital down the street to bring in special tubing because he was on the trach, and you can't put anything metal in a MRI machine. So they got that all taken care of. Oh, they spent hours doing that. And then they put him in the MRI machine, and they came back, and they're like, well, for the most part, everything looked good, but when he had his grand mal seizure, we don't like what we saw, and it attacked his vision area. So if he does wake up, or when he wakes up, he's probably going to be blind. Well, his mother, Marilyn, was just beside herself, and I'm like, let's just wait and see. Okay, so now back to, we're trying to deal with that. If he wakes up, he's going to be blind. We don't know if he's going to wake up, and then all of a sudden he opens his eyes, and they're like, so they're looking at him. Of course, he's like, probably traumatized because he doesn't know what's going on. He can't speak. Oh, shoot. I did forget something else. See, there's so much that happened during the coma. One other thing. Sorry. Let's go back. I think it was week 2, late week 2. Bill had this really awesome mustache, right? So I went home. I came back on the next day and I walk in the room, usually, good morning, sweetie. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, what looks different? There is something different. But I couldn't figure it out. Look, all of a sudden I'm like, where's his mustache? So I call the nurse and I go, what happened to my husband's mustache? She's like, I know, I noticed that this morning. It was gone. Somebody must have shaved it last night. I'm like, what the? I go, that man, I've never known him without a mustache. He started growing that in high school and he's so proud of it. Oh my God, you better hope he doesn't wake up because he's going to be pissed. And they're like, so of course, um, they talked to the night staff. Nobody copped us shaving the mustache. So I had to put a big note over his bed. Do not shave mustache. I said, you better hope that mustache grows before he wakes up because he's going to be mad as shit. Okay. Week 4, and the mustache did, thank God, grow back. Oh, would he have been mad? And who does that? I mean, really. And then no one copped to it. That's the funny part. Well, it just didn't. Bill didn't do it, I'm pretty sure. Okay. And so, anyways, Bill wakes up. His eyes are open and they're all looking at him, but they're like, hmm. So then what they do, because he was laying there, so they weren't sure if he was completely blind or maybe part of vision. So it turns out his vision when he first woke up, he did have it, but he could only see like this much. And it did get better as time went on, but they were like, we need to get his wife down here right now, because they were talking to him, but it wasn't to him. It was all blah blah. It was like another foreign language because he didn't know where he was. So I hopped in the car, hour drive, get down there. I'm running into the room and they're like, all right. So that they're like, Lynn's here. So the doctors came. And so then what I did was I leaned over. So remember, they're thinking he can only see like this. So I leaned over so that I could get into his face. And I look at him and he's like, he smiled like, I know you. And I'm like, honey, it's me. And then you could just see his body just kind of, you know what I mean? And then his mother hadn't gotten there yet, but she was on her way because I called her too. And she said, they said, ask him questions. And I said, can you, well, obviously he could see me, but they were like, so we had to figure out his vision. So I moved away what you could. So we figured out where his vision was, and it was about at this point, this much, but it kept getting better and better and better. And he was not blind. Thank God. So I'm talking to him, do you know who I am? Yes. Yes, this? No. Do you know where you are? And then he went like this. So he did and he didn't. I said, okay, I explained. You had a grand mal seizure, you went to a coma. And I said, it is September or whatever, because he went in August and he just looked at me like, I said, I know. And the Bears game is on Sunday. So you got to get going. And so I asked, do you remember you had a son? Do you remember his name? And I said, is it Michael? Do you remember how old he is? No. So there were some things, but he was alert. So we're like, thank God. And then he's pointing at this thing and they're like, all right, we can't take that out right away, but we're gonna if we think you're gonna be all right, but we don't know. So we talked about it as the day went on, and we decided he was getting really agitated, and they said, okay, we're gonna take it out. So they finally took it out, and he couldn't really talk for a while. So they're like, we're going to move him out of ICU now and move him down what they call step down. It's like the next unit before you put him on the floor, but you're watched, 24 hours a day. And so they put him in there, and all of a sudden he started to be able to talk a little bit. Then all of a sudden, he started swearing, and he was asking for his dad, and this and that. And the nurses are like, and they knew Bill. Bill was the kindest guy. I mean, he never said bad things. And we're all like, oh my God, what's going on? They're like, sometimes with head injuries, it just happens. It's the body, his head's swollen still from what was going on, and he's just speaking. And his father had passed away. He wasn't even alive, but he kept asking for his dad. And you'll find out why later. So now Bill is back with us. And then, after a couple days, I'm sitting and they're like, okay. And then they moved him to a regular room and they're like, he's like, what? And I'm filling him in on everything. And he's, except for some things. And he's like, and I said, yeah. Dr. Havey came into the room of the internist now, remember? Or Dr. H. I keep saying that. It don't matter. It's just you people. It's not like anybody else is watching this show. And he's like, I told you. He goes, in my opinion, and no one else agrees with me, but this is what I think. I think that man's body was done. He had the grand mal seizure. We know that because, and they said it has to do with the brain surgery and stuff. He said, but I don't think his body just needed to rest big time because of the diet, no kidneys, the dialysis, all this stuff. And he goes, and he just needed to sleep. I said, well, and I looked at Bill and I said, 4 weeks was a little bit long of a nap, all right? Let's not do that again. And he's like, okay. So, at that point, we're like, you are, even the nurses. I had nurses coming up to me saying, you got to write a book because no one thought, this one nurse said to me that he was going to wake up, let alone being fine. And she said, really? And I'm like, oh, really? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, he's incredible. This is an incredible person. And so after that, he obviously couldn't come home. He had to go into what they call rehab so he could learn to walk again and move his arms. It wasn't that bad, but he wanted to drive. And now they're saying, yeah, I don't think driving's going to be a good idea for you. And not right now. So he was really pissed. But so then he went to a rehab for a couple weeks, and it was in Park Ridge. It was by Lutheran General actually, and he went there. And what they did was and they even took him. They're like, "What do what would you be doing now?" And so they took him to the grocery store. He had to make a meal because they wanted to know how the brain was processing it. And they said for the most part everything's working. They know that everything's slow right now because it's going to take time to whatever happened in there to heal. So it was going to take some time. I'm like, that's fine. And so I will leave you with this. Then it became AC after coma, BC before coma. So as years went on, if we were talking about something, and Bill's like, I don't remember that. And I go, oh, that's BC. So then I would tell him, and he's like, and then it would come back. So his long term memory wasn't terrible, but there were some things he just never ever could remember. But if I reminded him, so AC, BC became our thing for the rest of his sickness. And things were not quick to the brain, you know what I mean? And he couldn't, large crowds was a problem for him. It was if there was a lot of people in a room talking, like, how people congregate in the kitchen and they're real loud. He could never do that. He would have to leave. So that's the coma story. There's more that will go from that afterwards, but I can't get into that because I've been yapping for a long time now. So, needless to say, we survived. And that's why I lost all that weight so I could look great in July at my sister's wedding that I told you about already. That's why I looked hot, man, because I was at that hospital all the time. So I was hardly eating. And, it's not the really good way to lose weight, but I did. I, of course, have managed to put it on and then some. But we survived. Everybody in that hospital knew us. Oh, this is the funny part, too. We had a truck, a, big, regular, 4x4 truck. That was one of our cars. And there was no real parking because it was in Chicago. So you would what they call valet park. And at first I'd come, and driving down there with a truck in the city was tough. And I learned back roads so I could get there faster. And at first they're like, lady, this truck is a pain in the ass. They hated it. And I'm like, well, this is what I drive. And then after a while I would come in the morning and they're like, just leave it here. And then what was so cool is they'd go park it because I said, I won't be back. So after, so many weeks, I said, this is when I'm going to leave. And you know what? I'd go down there and I'd say, well, I'm going to leave at 6. I go down there, my truck was waiting for me. and it was awesome. I'm telling you, we knew everybody. We knew the cleaning people, we knew the lunchroom people, we knew the car hops. Everybody knew us, including Oprah. So, yeah, that's the coma story. And it was, sometimes I look back at it and I don't even know how I got through it. But there are some things that came out of the coma that those are no other stories. Because I'm going to tease you with this, but Bill had dreams and he remembered them. So this is going to be pretty cool, but that's later. Okay, coma story. I hope it was interesting. I think it is, and it does prove that you never know. You know, you don't know. That's why they call it practicing medicine, because they really don't know. Those people never thought. I mean, they were telling me, they had me put the DNR on him, which I took off. And then once he woke up, and then they were saying maybe look for nursing homes. I had the social worker, she's like, he doesn't have kidneys, so he can go on health. I mean, he was getting disability because he didn't have kidneys, and they were trying to give me ideas so that, if you have to put him in a nursing home, you could lose your house and this and that. So we had to, I mean, that was all being told to me why I'm dealing with my sick husband. It was, whew, I gotta tell you. So that's it. And after that coma, he lived 16 more years. So, that tells you a lot. Now, if you have any questions, you can certainly put them on comments on there. Oh, and the other thing I was going to put out there, which would be fun, is if you know me, I like to make up songs. You can tell me anything like, hey, it's raining out. I'll make up a little song. So, if you like to challenge me and would like me to sing a song, you like say, you can write, I like going to the baseball game, or put it in the comments on YouTube and I'll make up a song. What do you say? Jose. Okay, thanks for listening. As always, I really appreciate it. It started out with a lot of views, and now we're not too many. So, but that's okay. I'm enjoying it. I'm sure the regulars are enjoying it. So, thank you so much. And my message: smile today. Be happy. Smile at a stranger. Say hi to a stranger. Help somebody out. Let's unite. Especially with all this crap on that corona shit that's going around. Listen, people. Thousands of people die from the flu every year and nobody talks about it. And that's what this is. I'm not saying it's not going to turn into something, but the media is making it too much. So wash your hands. Of course, now I'm saying this, I'll probably get it. Wash your hands. I have a note by the door. Wash your hands. So when I come home from the store, I wash my hands. Because really, you get sick by holding shopping carts and touching stuff. I'm grateful I don't work in a corporate office anymore because, when I worked at Baxter and all the subsidiaries, I was always sick. 1 to 2 times a year, good virus every year. And I swear it was because of those buildings. I wanted to know the last time they cleaned those carpets. Think about it. And I'm glad I'm not in an office atmosphere because that is a breeding ground for viruses like this. So I'm just gonna chill out of my little house in Lakeville, in Las Vegas again, pickled Las Vegas, and I'm sure all will be good. So be happy, help somebody out. Let's love one another. And tomorrow, a special guest, and it's a she. And let me see if I can give you another hint. She likes to play Vegas. There you go, okay? And she's alive. Literally alive. Not like Lucy and Ricky, Lucy and Elvis. I don't know how they came down, but it was awesome, wasn't it? I'm sure we're going to have more guests because Lucy said she was going to go back up and tell everybody about it. So who knows? I may be more popular in heaven than I am on earth. But boom. All right, love you guys. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. Keep on rocking and rolling, and don't forget to watch the Vegas Baby Show starring me, Lynn. Oh boy.